All right, welcome to the Lake Mills City Council meeting for August 16th. I'm going to fight with this mask tonight, so bear with me as I switch my glasses on and off so they fog up every time I take a breath, but I'll try to project into the microphone tonight. So that was the call to order. If we can have a roll call, please.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Ms. Quidnow?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Yes, here.
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Mrs. Bishop?
Here.
All right, if everyone can please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, correction and approval of City Council minutes of August 2nd, 2022. Can we have a motion to accept?
I move to accept the City Council meeting minutes of 8/2/22. I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. Any discussion, comment? Seeing none, all those in favor, just raise your hand.
Aye.
That's a 5-0. Thank you, Steve. All right, correspondence. I'll start. Correspondence from the community. I had an email on the bike lanes on East Lake Street. Just a question on where we are in that process. Sandy Beach Restaurant and Trailer Park actually had 2 correspondences on that. And also there was a Eagle Scout ceremony, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, for Anton Saucedo. I hope I pronounced that right, Anton, but congratulations on your Eagle Scout. He did the library walk in Wallace Park, so that was his Eagle Scout project. So congratulations to him, and it's always great to have a new Eagle Scout in the community. So, Ms. Curler.
I received several contacts regarding the ATV-UTV ordinance, email regarding Sandy Beach Park redevelopment ideas, a question about board and committee roles in our strategic plan, an invitation to the Bartles Beach Playground Equipment dedication that's coming up on Labor Day weekend. And then I think we were all just provided some correspondence from Rick Wollin, who has an item on the agenda tonight. That's it.
All right. I'm going to skip all the way over and go with Ms. Quidnow.
I don't really have anything else to add. The Sandy Beach email that came through, I responded to and received a prompt response back. So hopefully that correspondence continues so I can learn a little bit. And then there were just a few things with regard to the way that the agenda for today is prepared.
Okay. Mrs. Bishop?
Yes, I received a couple of emails about the ATV ordinance. I have received an email about the Sandy Beach project, as well as an in-person correspondence. Sorry, I'm just checking my emails too. And then I also had a meeting with ARLAC members and directors about the future of ARLAC with the city.
All right. Email forward to, Steve Fields. Mr. Fields, did you have any correspondence?
Mine was very similar with the emails on the UTV ordinance, the Sandy Beach, the playground, and then I also had one additional one for an invite to an Enbridge tour of their pump station in Waterloo.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. So now we enter the question and public comment section. So the public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda. If you've registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order, I put my comma in the wrong spot there, but this time on items that are not on the agenda, if you've registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order, the state's open meeting laws discourage action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when starting your comments. And fill out the sign-in sheet provided. So the mic is open. Any public comment?
Good evening. My name is Tori Smith. I'm one of the owners of HG Restaurant Group, Crawfish Junction out there in Milford. Also have business downtown there. We're renting at 136 East Lake, live at W8090 County Road B. Just a couple things I wanted to mention or kind of ask. I know it's been a little bit of time since we've formally done anything here as far as the proposal goes. I know you guys are discussing a lot of correspondence that came in. 3 things I just wanted to get through really quick. The survey, obviously, that's on the agenda tonight. I'm guessing that I'll get some answers about that. Just kind of curious, I guess, what maybe the type of questions are, the direction of the information they're trying to get from that. So again, if that's something we would wait for, I can definitely wait for that on the agenda. The second thing, I guess, is just our desire to see the process move along. It's been all summer. We've been busy. I know you guys are busy, trying to run the restaurant. You guys trying to do stuff down here. But we've kind of stalled per se or haven't moved forward. The survey is the next step, but I'd look back to the RFP and kind of how that laid out. And we talked about in March even having a sit down with you guys and kind of discussing this. And we'd like an opportunity to do that. I feel like things maybe that public comments or some of the things you guys talked about in the work group, we have some thoughts, some ideas, some things on that we'd like to discuss, maybe to provide some clarification and things like that. So I know the survey's happening. I would really hope that we can see this process kind of move along with ourselves, with the other company that, put the proposal in and kind of moving through the process that we had expected from the beginning. So otherwise, just kind of recapping that, let me see. Again, I just kind of want to reiterate as far as that goes, we want to, knowing maybe some of the history of that place, the previous owner, some of the things there, we really feel like to make this work as a two-way relationship, we really got to work together on this to see this through. So we would just like to see that done and do what we can together with you guys to provide the best solution that we can up there and hopefully move forward with this process. So I guess that's about it. Sorry. Guess that's about it, and I hope we get some clarifications and some answers on that. I know Eric's not here. Eric's been a great point of contact and answered some questions for me early on. So summer's coming to an end, and I hope we can move forward. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? No other public comment? All right, moving forward, City Manager's report. Mr. Wilkie?
I don't have anything to add other than that I've had a significant number of documents on the agenda this time.
Steve, can you turn your microphone on, please?
I don't have anything else to add. I had 9 documents on there, so if you have any questions that you want answered, I can probably work on it. But other than that, they're just basically financial information and the strategic plan.
Any questions for Mr. Wilkie?
I have one question. Under the capital budget, we have $99,500 that was spent on computers that wasn't budgeted for on that line. I'm just kind of curious for a clarification what that was for, or should that be allocated someplace else?
think he's pulling it up right now.
Yeah, I think
It's a lot of computers.
99,000.
About 2/3 of the way down. It's,
Yeah, under the fire department?
Yep, for computers.
Okay, it was coded incorrectly. That's actually their personal
Is that
protective gear, personal protective equipment. You remember
Yeah,
that was what the price was. I thought that was right, but I was wondering why it got coded as computers.
Yeah, I think we had set aside 110,000 for PPE in the budget.
Right.
That's why I was kind of curious what this was for, because I know we had set other money aside for them.
No, I think that just got coded wrong because it was supposed to be PPE.
Okay, just clarification. I knew we had set money aside for them, but I knew it wasn't for computers.
Yeah.
That was my only question. Thank you.
I know that we have some big computer purchases coming up, but we didn't do them this year. A lot of it has to do with the cybersecurity at the utilities, but that's next year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Steve, I just had a couple questions on the general fund budget. I'm always paying attention to the planning and engineering costs. I know that's really fluctuated quite a lot. We have costs for the comprehensive plan that the city council authorized, and are those costs being charged to the city council category? I think that was how we budgeted it, but I'm not sure if that's how it's being, withdrawn or vouchered. So that's why I wanted to check and see if that had anything to do with the planning and engineering costs.
I'm pretty sure that was under capital, and it was some of the money we were using from the unreserved fund balance, but I don't see it in here. So it might be going to the general fund one.
Okay, yeah, and I thought that was one of the items that was part of the city council budget, budget category because that was something we knew that needed to be paid for this year. So like I said,
No,
I'm just kind of.
There were two things under the city council budget. One was the staffing study, and the other one was the executive search.
Oh, okay.
And then the comprehensive plan was under the capital budget.
Was under capital. Okay, all right, thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so then that would not be showing up on the general fund.
It shouldn't be,
Planning
but,
and engineering.
yeah, it shouldn't be, but it looks like there hasn't been any going to the capital, so I'm gonna have to follow up on that.
Yeah, because I think it would be good to separate those. I know it's the same consulting firm that does planning for us, so there can be, some overlap there.
I
And
wonder
then,
I know I mark them every time they come in. so
Of which
I'm just a
category they should
Yeah,
go
but
to,
the
okay.
same with the PPE, so.
And then one other category under the general fund, the community development. Just, can you refresh our memory on what does that payment go for? I think it says Main Street.
Main Street and Chamber, Main Street gets 17,500 and the Chamber gets 1,500. And then there's, I think it's in a different category, but Jefferson County Economic Development Consortium gets like $9,500.
Those are expenses that the city makes to those entities. Okay, thanks.
We also, some of them come in different categories, like we make contributions to the band, $1,500, but that's under parks. And so we make several other contributions to other organizations, but they may be spread out through the budget.
Okay.
I think in the police department under service contracts, they have some for unwed mothers facility in Jefferson and things like that. So There's a lot of money that we do in certain types of donations spread out through the budget.
In different departments, but then this one has got its kind of its own category. It's not tied to a department. Okay, thanks.
On the Treasury's cash report, this might be for Ms. Bell, but there was a couple of large debits. One was for ARPA for $313K. Was that the second part of the ARPA fund? Yep, okay. And then TID 5 for about $500,000.
That was the borrowing for TID 5
So it was
for
a
the
loan.
final payment to Topels and the payment, developers agreement payment for formal. That was
Okay.
bond proceeds, or borrowing proceeds into TID 5.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we borrowed the money and put it directly into TID 5, and then they pay Topel. TID 5 pays Topels.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Mr. Wilkie? All right, moving on to item 8, Councilmember Board Report and acceptance of minutes from the Police and Fire Commission of October 21st, 2021, January 20th, 2022, May 19, 2022, June 22nd, 2022.
I move to accept the minutes of the Police and Fire Commission of the dates mentioned.
Second.
Those are actually just accepted.
Yeah, is there any
Oh, sorry.
questions
Jumped the
on any of that?
No. I was just curious why there was, it seemed like there was a bit of a delay. Some of the minutes are rather old. I didn't know if there was a issue with them not getting approved at prior meetings or something like that. Do you know?
They meet irregularly. If there's no business, they'll skip months, and then there's also been some turnover on that board.
Okay, thanks.
All right, seeing no further questions, we'll accept these minutes into our record. Council business item A, discussion decision on 2023 street maintenance projects. There's motion 22-8-2-1. Can we have a reading of that motion, please?
Motion 22-8-2-1, approval of 2023 street maintenance program.
All right, can we have a motion?
I'm loud without my mic. I move to accept motion 22-8-2-1, the approval of the 2023 street maintenance program.
Second?
Second.
Oh. Steve can have it.
A motion by Ms. Curler, motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Ms. Curler. Staff comment.
I guess Steve is handing off. So my first question is, do we want, since the long agenda we have, do you want me to go through the presentation that I inserted into the agenda and presented to the Public Works Board? Or should we just recap some of the highlights of our plan? In general, what we're doing.
Good with the recap.
Thanks.
Recap.
Thanks, Mr. Waters. Just as a recap of every August, we do this. Last year, if you recall, because of the bill funding, we did some changes in March, and you approved some process to try to go after some bill funding. We did that. Unfortunately, the first round we did not receive, so we did reapply for much of the Brookstone Mill and Overlay areas. And we reapplied in early June. We have not heard the results of that yet. With this program, then, in 2023, we are proposing $300,000 for 2023 maintenance, which is $50,000 more than last year, but significantly lower than the average of the last 7 years. In average, over the last 7 years, we've been averaging about $500,000. In that presentation, the summary is the program is working very, very well. For that cost, and if you recall the plan is to do maintenance activities at a much lower cost than just doing street reconstruction. I can stop right there if you're fully aware of all the information in the documents, but I can answer any questions you might have.
Floor is open.
Okay, I want to talk about the money in the reserve account. It looks like, to me on the face, that money is being carried over from previous years that was not spent. And so we have that available in addition to tax revenue dollars for our budget next year. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I'll note that on the last page of the presentation, there was information regarding that. And the reason we brought, obviously that reserve account is there. But because of the bill funding and the range that we might be in, depending if you recall, if we get into the bill funding, we're doing mill and overlay, which costs more, but we're getting an 80-20 grant or federal funds for those. That being said, the two plans that we have for the 2-year cycle range from $380,000 to $540,000 for that 2-year cycle. If we do 250 and 300, we're right at that 550. And there have been dollars spent already this year. So we wanted to show that in that we would potentially need some of that reserve fund if we do get that bill funding and we do proceed with the mill and overlay. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And what I'm getting at, and what I will also ask for future agenda items tonight, is how much of this cost, let's say we stick with about $300,000 without the bill funding, how much of that are we going to be paying for out of our current funds versus borrowing for?
All the capital items, including the street maintenance, are come through the debt service. The only items that are on the operational levy are, like payroll, the regular operations. So anything that you would see in the street rebuilds, the maintenance, equipment purchases is all on the debt levy.
Okay, thank
Any
you.
other questions?
That's why
All right, now, thank you.
that's why at the end of the year, we always set aside those funds into a reserve account so that they're followed by the bonds, so that they come through. Now this year, I think that's not quite true because we used, if you remember, we used about $1 million worth of unreserved fund balance. And I think that $300,000 might have been part of the unreserved fund balance amount. But there are funds there that will probably be carried over in some form or fashion. But everything in the capital has historically been debt levy.
That was my recollection as well, Steve, that when, in the final budget, we asked to have, it was somewhere around $950,000 from the unreserved fund balance used for part of the capital budget. And then, so I think not a lot remained on the debt levy.
Well, there was over $1 million. There was like 1.3 or 1.4 million dollars that went on the into bond. Most of Oak Street. I know the new fire truck did. I'm trying to remember. There were a couple other items on that were, what we try and do is split it up. So we didn't, everything we tried to do was, normally anything that's less than 15 years, we do a loan on, and everything over 15 years is a bond. So we went through and picked out everything that we thought would qualify as 15 years or less and used that for the unreserved fund balance, and then we used the rest for bonds, so. And if I remember correctly, it was about $2.3 million that we originally had, and then we split that up between the bonds and the unreserved fund balance.
Any other questions? All right, and I'll point out that the Public Works Board recommended this from their motion 22-8-1. And if there's no other questions, we'll go to roll call. Roll call,
Mr.
please.
Waters?
Aye.
Mr. Waters? Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quednow?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is discussion decision on 2023 capital improvement projects. This is motion 22-8-2-2. Can you please read that motion? Laura, you with me?
Yes, I am. Sorry. And I'm sorry. What did you want me to do?
Motion 22-8-2-2.
Okay. Motion 22-8-2-2, approval of 2023 capital improvement plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve motion 22-8-2-2, approval of the 2023 capital improvement plan.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mrs. Bishop. City staff, comment?
I'll start again with whether or not you would like me to go through the presentation that I provided at Public Works Board. But in general, that presentation helps to show what your 7-year capital improvement plan is doing with regard to your life cycle timelines for streets, sewer, and water. And while, again, this board decides ultimately what the approval of the capital improvement plan, and it's a 5 to 10 year plan that is continually changing, the current plan, just noting that we are falling behind on the life cycle, but we also recognize as a staff that the dollars are significant already. But just to point out that the life cycles, if we're looking at a 60-year life cycle for streets, we're not replacing at that pace. Similarly with sewer and water, similar analysis in that presentation. So that's the piece of that presentation. And then to keep in mind that the capital improvement plan is always a dynamic document. It changes regularly. We are proposing 2023 street construction of College Street from Ferry Drive to Lakeshore Drive to the lake in 2023, which would be ultimately what you would be approving for the budget for 2023. Other additional items, I see that Eric and Paul are online as well. But if there's any specific questions that are in the capital improvement plan, we're here to answer them for you.
Thank you.
This is Paul. I'm sorry, this is Paul. May I make just a couple of quick comments?
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
All right, and this is.
Can you
information
speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry. How's that, a little better?
That's better, thank you.
All right. This is information that we also presented to the Public Works Board, but I just want to really emphasize it. 3 points, actually. One is that you'll see, especially in the equipment purchases, that we are doing a lot of cross-department purchasing, using of equipment, that sort of thing. And what we're attempting to do from year to year is balance the dollar amount of purchases. Now, 2 things. One, you'll notice that we have some large ticket items like a bucket truck and a vac truck. Those are big price tags. I told the Public Works Board that when I first got here about 16 years ago, we bought a bucket truck, and it was less than half of the price that you see now. The other thing that comes up with these types of items, and again, particularly the bucket truck and the vac truck, is that we're being told that even if we order that equipment today, it will be 2 years before it's delivered. And what the price will do between now and then is really kind of concerning. But the intention here is that we get on the schedule to get these things built and get them in as fast as we can. We've been extending the life of equipment because we know the cost is going up. The 2 larger pieces that we're talking about have probably peaked as far as how much longer we can keep them and when they'll start really depreciating rapidly. The other thing, going back to the cross-department stuff, we're really trying to buy equipment that can be shared, and you'll notice that on a number of items. And when I say shared, it's not just with the streets department and utilities, but also with parks and forestry. And so we've been working together on that for quite some time to see if we can get the best deals, divvy up that cost a little bit, and also keep the equipment moving a lot longer. And then my final comment is that we have a vehicle replacement schedule. And what you see in front of you is pretty close to what we have determined we'll need for the next 5 to 7 years. We present this with the understanding that it may change. Different equipment may break down faster than we thought, that sort of thing. But I just want you to understand that this is not just, hey, let's pull something out of the air. We've got a vehicle replacement schedule that we're trying to follow.
Hey, Paul, I'm glad you're on the line. I got a couple of questions. When I look at the next couple years, the numbers look pretty much in line. But then when it gets to 2025, 2026, 2027, those numbers come close to doubling what we're looking at currently. I notice wastewater and sanitary sewer department is a large expenditure in those years. It looks like some lift stations are coming due. Can you talk a little bit about that? Those lift stations that are coming up? Specifically, I'm looking at Inglesburg lift station and then the Sandy Beach lift station.
And Dwayne can probably talk about that if you want him to.
Okay.
So those lift stations are aged, and Bill continually mentions that there are certain lift stations that are coming to capacity and coming to life cycle end, and he has several that he's quite concerned about over the next 5 to 10 years. So what we're trying to do is put them in the capital improvement plan to show that we're seeing some lift stations that will need some attention, if not full reconstruction, at least some major overhaul. I think there's also in the capital improvement plan a generator as well for Bill, a mobile one, for some of those concerns, being able to get to a lift station if it does fail, and use the generator to pump with a separate pump to keep from the obvious unfortunate situation if the pump fails, and having that generator and being able to move with that emergency.
The Sandy Beach one has been on the line for a long time. And as you're looking at the phases in Sandy Beach, it would be done as part of that phase of the infrastructure improvements down there. Ingsburg, that's on Ferry. Anyways, we have multiple lift stations that need to be upgraded. To a certain extent, this doesn't give you a full picture because lift stations do qualify for impact funds, so we could use some impact funds on those. We just have to line that up with the engineers, and people have to know that in the future. There are some other things in here that are the answering machine. I know we've historically, well, actually, I think in 2002, we upgraded to our current system, which was better than our old system, believe it or not. And that's for emergency calls on water and sewer and streets and those types of things. This one's going to take all the calls on a computer basis, so even though you call and the line's already busy, they'll just roll you over to another one on the computer. I'll answer for you and record it for you, so that we won't get as many complaints about nobody would answer the phone. There is another item, and I don't see it in here.
What department was that listed under those computers?
Utilities, I thought I saw it under.
Yeah,
utilities.
I think it's the first item in all three of them. It's an answering service notification system.
Yeah.
There it is, okay.
Well, Steve is looking, I'll just make one other quick comment. Sorry, Steve, I'm sorry. We have that in there now. That's more than just an answering service. That's an emergency response system, so it helps us track outages, et cetera. We have the dollars in there to begin looking at that. We learned, just as we were putting this information together, that WPPI Energy is also looking at kind of a system-wide emergency response program, and so hopefully we can piggyback with them. We've got pretty good information about the vendor they may be using. So that number may decrease and it may get to be a little better program than we'd be able to afford by ourselves.
As a point of clarification, can you explain what the 1/4 after the answering machine notification system is, as well as the underground locating equipment?
It's one system, but it's divided across 4 funds.
Oh, okay, so that's what he was talking about with the sharing. Okay, thank you.
So there's, we're also getting into the cybersecurity stuff. So I noticed that the SCADA substation upgrades on here for one of them. But there'll be some additional software stuff. We're also looking at, and I didn't see that on here, and I assume that it'll be budgeted. When we budget it, it'll be in the package. But I know Eric and Alan have been working on a citywide camera system that will be in this budget, and that'll be funded across those. And so that may appear in here. So even though it's not listed here, there are some items that are still, will probably still be in the budget for, that you'll notice in the capital budget for next year. So those are a couple of the items. This is historically what we budget, work for through our Public Works Board, is these types of items. So.
Just to clarify a couple of questions that have already been asked. Michelle, the 1/5, so the number that's in that line item would then be 5 times that if you lump each 1/5 together. So that line item will appear in 5 different departments.
That's what I was looking for, to see if there was one that says 2/5, 3/5, but no. Okay.
Each one is
Got it.
1/5, and if it doesn't show up on this list, the 5th one typically is the Parks Department.
Okay, thank you.
And then to Mr. Waters' question earlier about the increase, I think some of that is explained by the fact that we did do some some STP funding applications for a number of projects, that being North CP Avenue, Stony, South CP Avenue, and Lakeview Avenue. And those are occurring late in the bill funding, 25, 26, and 27. If we would get some of that funding, we're basically doing 2 projects in 1 year versus 1. And so I think some of that explains some of the jump in those later years. We'll know more as we get to those years if we get that funding. I think in my presentation I had noted and had an asterisk that I probably skipped over, which is if we don't get that funding, then the likelihood that those projects will drop from the CIP plan. Not that they'll drop, that there isn't a need, they will just slide into a later year.
I guess as I look at the budgeted numbers, the 2023, 2024 seem in line, but 2025 is kind of a panic. I mean, I guess looking at those numbers now, I would expect something would come off the list somehow.
Yeah, we don't get the bill funding, probably won't. They'll shift out.
Yeah, push back out. Okay.
But we did want to show that that's where we applied for it. If we do receive it, it will fall in that year. Again, it's a dynamic plan. If in that year we decide that we wouldn't do our normal project and that pushes further out, that's a decision that this board and future boards can make.
Just maybe a quick follow-up to that, though. It does appear that there's the equipment purchases, there's a few big-ticket items in later years, and I think some of that, from what you explained at the Public Works Board, is just the nature of the life cycle of those pieces of equipment, that's the timing of when they're likely to need replacement. So it does result in a certain amount of fluctuation from year to year.
Yes, certain amount of lumpiness, I think, is the word we've used in the past. I think in our last topic, when we talked about street maintenance, we'll be facing that, unfortunately, in the next couple of years, because when we really took on the maintenance program about 7 years ago, we attacked it with quite a few dollars to get the street maintenance up. So I think, to your point, you'll see a little bit of that with the equipment as well. Paul, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, the other part about the equipment is that, like I mentioned, the prices of these things are really quite unpredictable right now. Between costs going up and supplies, we're kind of sticking to our replacement plan from a year standpoint, what we need to replace in a given year. But now what's happening to the prices is affecting how much we try to budget for. Typically, we try to budget for an approximately, level amount, but with what's going on with prices, that's getting more and more difficult. So, like I say, one of the things we may have to do is try to extend the life of some of these things. If I may, really quick, circle back to the cybersecurity thing, because this is a big deal. I mean, it's going to be a huge thing. We're being pushed by EPA, the national security and all that stuff. I believe the cameras that Steve has mentioned will all show up in the police budget, because that's where it's kind of being centralized, and then we'll have to figure out costs per department after that.
Actually, I've already started working on dividing those up, Paul.
Yeah.
I've asked
And
Eric
that's so,
Alan to provide me the numbers.
yeah, thank you.
So you're going to split them between departments?
Yeah.
Correct.
Each building is going to have a certain set of security cameras set up, and then the computers that support them and the software and the packages that go along with it will be incorporated into that. And they've done it by building, so then we'll figure out who pays for it from there. The one I don't see on here is the TAP grant, but that's a grant from the feds.
What kind of price are they looking at for the security system?
Eric?
I'd have to pull up my quote for the document, but it's in the, I believe, at least over $100,000. But I can verify again through CIP documents for the quote provided.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if Dwayne has that spreadsheet available, it should be in the most recent capital request Excel spreadsheet.
Sounds like we'll be seeing it with the budget in a few weeks.
Yeah, this is kind of our preliminary plan. You'll actually get the budget like you did last year in the ClearGov, and there'll be a capital item, and that you'll be able to go through those, and that'll show basically 1 year and then the past history.
So the budget will be presented at our next meeting? It's the first meeting in September?
Yes, it won't be presented. I'll make sure you get it and have it available and do a slight start on it, but yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the capital improvement plan?
So I have a couple of comments.
Yes.
First off, I generally don't like putting vehicles in the capital improvement plan because the lifespan of the vehicle may not even survive the term of the loan. So as we look at the budget, I'd like to figure out if there's anything we can pull out vehicle-wise and pay for besides borrowing. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I'm looking at the projects by department list, and at the end, the grand total for 2023 is 2.7 million, and I take it that that does not include anything of the 300 to 500,000 from the street maintenance program?
No, I believe that, all right.
You are correct.
Okay, thank you.
The street maintenance would be separate.
Okay. That's all I had, thank you.
And to answer a previous question, I did pull up the spreadsheet for Eric. Eric, building camera system installation, 2024 is 145. Is that the number you're looking for?
I believe that's it.
That would be the number excluding the data systems for city count or the municipal building. But yes, 145 would be the camera systems for buildings.
All right, any other questions on the capital improvement? Seeing none, let's move to a roll call. On motion 22-8-2-2.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the discussion decision on authorizing installation of legendary Lake Mills historic tour signage, existing Commons Park kiosks. This is motion 22-8-2-3. Can we have a reading of that motion?
Motion 22-8-2-3, approval of installation of Lake Mills historical tour signage in existing Commons Park kiosks.
Can we have a motion?
I move to approve motion 22-8-2-3, approval of installation of Lake Mills historical tour signage in existing Commons Park kiosk.
Second. Sorry, Steve.
Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. Staff comment?
Eric?
I was approached by multiple members of Legendary Lake Mills, mostly Cynthia Weston, Hope Owsdyke, and Raina Severson, to do something with the blank kiosk that was across from Cafe on the Park in Commons Park. That sign that was initially installed there was a number of years ago. That was a business directory. There were businesses that were multiple years since out of business in there, and included things like Joseph McGann's, Anna Maria's Pizza, so we're talking a number of years that they were outdated. So that sign was removed 2 years ago. Since then, the sign has remained vacant, so there's nothing in that kiosk for the last 2 years. Those three representatives of Legendary Lake Mills approached me to see if I had any additional ideas as far as what could be in there. The only recommendation that I gave is something that would not be so easily outdated, such as a business directory, and the idea that they proposed would be a historical walking tour. You can see the examples that were provided were the rendering of what they would like to install down there.
All right. Is there anyone here from Legendary Lake Mills that'd like to comment? We'll suspend the rules here. Hang on.
I'll move to suspend the rules to allow representatives from Legendary Lake Mills to speak with us.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Curler to suspend the rules, second by Ms. Quidnow. All those in favor, raise your hand. Steve?
Aye. Aye.
5-0. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Weston. I helped work on this project with most of our whole committee, and the concept was to fill the empty kiosk, which was not anything but an eyesore, with something that looked welcoming to Lake Mills. So the first thing it says is "Welcome to Lake Mills" for anyone who comes to any of our downtown events. And then it was going to be a very simple walking tour, something fun that people could do. There's two elements of it. The historic part refers to all of the buildings with their historic name and tells why it was created in the first place, so it will never be out of date. That will always remain the same. And the second portion is public art, so that both things are, in almost all of them, within a couple of blocks that you could walk to and get a good sense of Lake Mills if you're just looking for something to do while you have friends visiting for the weekend. So on one side that says "Welcome to Lake Mills" is a drawing of a historic home, because we have both homes and commercial buildings in the historic portion. So it's an easy to look at map and just the names. And on the other side that faces the park is the description of each of the items that are on the map. And then we're also going to have a little box attached to one of the columns that the kiosk is attached to. That will be a folding map that looks just like the map that's in the kiosk and the sign on the back, so that people can take that and walk around with it and learn about the city while they are doing the tour.
Thank you, Ms. Weston. Any questions? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions on this item?
I have a question maybe, or clarification for staff. So is this sort of like a donation where Legendary Lake Mills is providing the signage, and then it will be installed in a city-owned kiosk, and then the city will be responsible for it after that? I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding the arrangement.
I'm gonna have to go
online
back.
here. It's, the sign itself is going to be purchased by Legendary Lake Mills. The installation will be by my staff, the Parks Department staff. And then the eventual replacement in the future, if it's needed, would be on Legendary Lake Mills' behalf. So if something like vandalism happens to the sign or sun fading due to the sign, it would be replaced by Legendary Lake Mills.
I'm going to go back and say, I'm trying to remember, but I think the chamber donated that to the city. And they were going to keep up the signage in it based on the businesses downtown so that people could find those. As noted already, that it wasn't kept up very well. So this is a new proposal that needs less maintenance, and I'm assuming that it should be a great idea.
Any other questions? Yes.
Just a comment. So I went to the tourlakemills.com webpage, which is listed on the back of the kiosk sign, and it's actually pretty neat. It gives you a picture of the house and tour mode, whether you're walking, biking, or driving. So I think that's a really neat product. I hope people know their homes are going to be listed here, because I might be surprised if it was my house, but just really beautiful houses that I didn't know the history of. So thank you all for putting this together.
I'll back that up. It is a really cool website, and it has a lot of great things. I know that many people will utilize the walking tour on their phones, so as long as we continue to have good coverage downtown, I think it will be good.
Make sure to credit Eli Weedle with that website development, which has been, he did that at least 4 years ago.
Okay.
Do you want to restate what she just said?
Sure, I'll state what she said. We'll be giving credit to Eli Weedle for his creation of the website 4 years ago and the continued maintenance on it.
I'll note that because the kiosk was given to the city and we donated the bricks for the project, because we had bricks left over from this building for quite a while. So you'll notice several features around the city that have leftover brick from the municipal building. That it will be our responsibility to maintain that, the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, let's move forward with a roll call on motion 22-8-2-3.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quednow?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Legendary Lake Mills. It looks like it's a great project.
Thank you
so
very much.
Appreciate it. Continued support of the community of Lake Mills, right?
Community
Yeah.
development.
Community development. Next is item D, discussion decision on upgrading Lake Mills Fire Department to transporting EMT basic service with flex licensing and authorizing expenditure of ARPA funds to bring ambulance into service. This has a motion 22-8-2-4. Can we have a reading of that motion?
Motion 22-8-2-4, authorizing the Lake Mills Fire Department to upgrade to transporting EMT basic service with flex licensing and authorizing the expenditure of ARPA funds to outfit and bring ambulance into service.
All right, thank you. Can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve motion 22-8-2-4. 2-4, approving the upgrade of the LMFD to a transporting EMT basic service with flex licensing and approving expenditure of ARPA funds to bring the ambulance into service.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Just trying to give Steve an opportunity.
All right, motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Staff discussion?
I provided a memo and some documents to support the memo and the upgrade information, including a letter from our medical director and some information from the chief. This goes along with the proposal that we have an ambulance. We are looking at continuing to support, so this would be like option 4, where Lake Mills Ambulance is the primary provider, and we provide support, but rather than having to use mutual aid all the time, they would use us as their backup ambulance. And so if you read the memo, it's like if the transporting agency shows up, we'll transfer. If they don't, we are able to transport, and then we have a service that provides a more robust response around the clock within the community. It is looking at getting us to June of next year, with as much staff availability as possible between the two agencies, and then it gives us an idea of what kind of options we're looking at. Probably the 3 were option 3, option 2B, and option 4, and under either one of those, having the ambulance ready to go would be a benefit to all of us, because option 3, it would just transfer over to the EMS department in the city, and 2B would be the fire department, and 4 would be continue to support with either another community or like Mills EMS or some other private vendor.
All right. Questions?
I guess I'll go first. I'm curious why we're having this brought forward if we just at our last meeting agreed to go out to get a consultant to tell us which direction we should be going and how to spend money. If we go with a private vendor, this would be totally unnecessary. Here's another $100 and some thousand we're going to commit. And I guess I don't agree with the ARPA funds either. This should have its own budget because it's a district-based. The ARPA funds are for the city specific. The townships got their own ARPA money, that we should be using our ARPA money for our resources and setting up a separate budget for this so we could have a real cost that can be passed on in a per capita. Basically, we're going to take and eat all the financing on other projects and not pass that interest on, where we could be saving our constituents money. So I guess I don't agree with the timing and the structure. This should be put off about 6 weeks before we get our report.
Well, after the last meeting, we were looking at, and we've historically discussed being able to provide the support. In fact, you and I and Dan and the medical director from Lake Mills EMS had this conversation about 4 years ago as to us being able to support in the form and fashion that would provide additional support to Lake Mills EMS. All the options, even if we went with a private vendor, we could do like we did with Fort Atkinson. They had a private vendor and they still had a backup ambulance. So it's not like we would never use it or never have a use for it, or there wouldn't be any place we would use it. It's a item that would be consistently used within the city of Lake Mills. Right now, we know that staffing is a problem across the two agencies. We can provide stronger support over the next 12 months, and that's a key item between both agencies. You'll note that Lake Mills is already looking at, in fact, tonight they may be going with Cambridge Fire and EMS. So you know that there are issues out there, and we need to be able to continue to make sure that we have the staffing to maintain Lake Mills service.
We could do that by having the two agencies work together. We already have 3 ambulances in service in the city. You're proposing a 4th ambulance, which creates even more overhead, more expenses, and it might not be necessary at all, depending on what our consultant comes back. Once we do this, we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves and told them, hey, we're going down this road. I guess what's the difference of waiting 6 more weeks and getting our consultant to come in and give us some advice?
Well, I don't believe that we're pigeonholed. It's the same conversation we had last time, but let's look at it from the position of us being able to, from the position that Lake Mills EMS came in and told us they needed to buy a new ambulance this year. So they're certainly looking at replacing an ambulance shortly. So from that standpoint, I believe that having that additional ambulance and being able to turn it over, even if it was with Lake Mills EMS, is going to be a benefit in the long term. And I think the idea of having it one in our department makes it easier for us to respond rather than having to run somewhere else and being credentialed differently and all those types of things. So we tried to work through that last time, Steve. You were there, and and this proposal gives us the option to be able to respond quickly from our services to back up Lake Mills EMS to provide high-quality service in the city of Lake Mills.
I don't question that. Well, my question is, I've been asking for budgets on this and how you're going to finance it and schedules, and we haven't been able to get anything. And now we're going to throw $100,000 at equipment. We should have some kind of a plan. I don't like just throwing money at something and saying, hey, we're going to try this. We need a plan. I'd like to see a budget. This should have its own budget, like the fire department or police department. It should have its own capital, which should be set up like a normal budgetary item. And we shouldn't just be throwing ARPA money at it. Right now, we could take that ARPA money and take care of all these security cameras. Like Mrs. Bishop said, we could knock off 2 or 3 of the pickup trucks that would help specifically the city, because that's what that money was intended for. Let's set this up as a department and start it out the right way, so we have the real dollars and the real money, so we know what we're going to spend.
Well, I provided budgets for all 6 options, and they were clear and logical budgets. Nothing is going to be absolute in those budgets, but they're good enough to be able to start formulating from. And I don't think that there was any problem with them. And you put the ARPA money in there, that's a use now, but if you had to buy the ambulances, and that's probably going to be 95% of the option that you're going to end up with, if you had to buy the ambulance next year, it's going to be a whole different item.
Mr. Fields, can you please state your relationship with the Lake Mills EMS, please?
Yep. Just to reiterate, I have several times in the past that I do volunteer on the Lake Mills EMS. Member helping out. So, no, that's why there's just a lot of history here, knowing the facts. Thank you.
Did you have any other questions, Mr. Fields?
Nope. I guess I'll listen to other people's comments and go from there. I may have some follow-up questions.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Ms. Curler.
Thank you. I guess I do have a couple questions. Is the city ambulance currently licensed and in service, and it's non-transporting? Is that the current status?
Yes, and when you look at it, it's not the ambulance, it's the service. Okay. So our fire department is licensed at a non-transporting level. So what the first item here is to authorize us to go ahead and get that transporting level authorized. We're not at the level of Lake Mills EMS. We're a grade below them. They're EMTAs. So what we would do is basically be a backup service to them on a regular basis for being able to transport when they can't generate enough ambulances, instead of them having to go to mutual aid or wait a long time for another ambulance to come out. So that was the concept here. The ambulance is here. We can license it. We can set it up to run, but it isn't ready to run yet. It wouldn't be worthwhile unless we had the authorization to upgrade the service level.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand is the current ambulance in use under the current licensure, and you're simply proposing to upgrade to a transporting license?
The ambulance became available in July, but because we're not a transporting agency, we can't use it. So we have to upgrade the level to be able to move to use it, along with the outfitting.
And so then the $63,800 is the cost of the equipment that would be needed to outfit the ambulance so that it could meet the transporting license requirements?
Yes, to upgrade it, well, to equip it to be a normal ambulance.
So I guess I also have, this, I think I'm done with my questions, but I guess I just do have a couple comments. I voted in favor of purchasing the ambulance. I don't think I understood that there would be these additional costs in order to put it into service. And I do share Mr. Field's concerns that this would be funded by ARPA funds. We're really whittling away at that money. And when we first got it, I don't think I envisioned that it would all be spent on emergency services, but we are, as important as emergency services are, it's funding that can be used for a lot of different things, and I'm hesitant, I guess, to use that funding source. So maybe I do have another question. Would there be another funding source that could be used for this project?
We could use unreserved bond funds, or unreserved general fund. We could borrow money, we could take a loan. But those are the two primary ways, other than ARPA funds.
And the cost would need to be incurred soon or this calendar year in order to complete this process? It's not something we could budget for 2023, for example?
No, it doesn't have to be done. I mean, this is to get ready to be, get that ambulance up, get our people responding, get them starting to get the experience they need under the medical directors and those types of things to be of assistance to Lake Mills EMS. If you wait longer till that point in time, you won't get it up until, you won't have the upgrade until it's time. And that's if you start in January. And you may have problems with that.
Because what would be the reason for the problems? Just
getting your ambulance
supply chain.
equipped, getting your services upgraded, getting your everything in place, the licenses, the level, the outfitting and the upgrade of the level. So those types of things.
And so this, I mean, we would, if this is approved tonight, those same steps would have to be followed, right? How long does that process take to do the licensure and the outfitting? I mean, are we talking several months or?
Well, I can answer the licensing question. The DH website says they reserve the right to take up to 60 days to review and approve the operational plan. So that's the timeline at DHS.
So a couple months, yeah.
At a minimum, yeah.
Thank you.
I have to, and Todd didn't come tonight, but I think that because we're already licensed and we've already been talking about it, they thought they could get it done quicker than that. But 60 days is the norm.
So we have to submit our operational plan to get that licensing approval. When can we do that, and what does our operational plan entail?
They have a bunch of forms that they fill out that provides information on what we're planning on doing and how we're doing it. We already have one in, so we need to upgrade some of the ideas in it, specifically that we're going to become a transporting agency, and then how our licensing, how we're handling our EMTs, and what kind of training and what kind of medical direction we're getting, and who's doing it for us, and those types of things. It becomes a little bit more problematic when you become a transporting agency. I shouldn't say problematic, but you have to provide more information on how that stuff is done. So I'm thinking that we could probably in 30 days have that information put together, ready to go, and then however long it takes DHS to license us, and then that information goes along with that. one of the parts of that is of course, they're going to inspect the ambulance. And so.
Just a follow-up question or comment. If it takes the 30 days to put all the documentation together, and we're going to have our consultant on board in that less than that time, doesn't it make sense to just get the paperwork ready, get the consultant on board, get clear direction, and before we spend money? Because we could, if we submitted this in November, I think our RFPs needed information back from them by the end of October. You'd still have your licensing January 1, even with the 60 days.
And you know what?
I don't see the big push, you know. I don't see it. I think I would love to see that consultant. I mean, we just authorized the funding and the money for that. Why would we jump the gun? Makes no sense to me.
Well, we had authorized the funding prior to that for a broader review, but let's say I'm good with that, Steve. If we start the upgrade of the license now, and at the point where we need to pull the trigger on that equipment, we can come back. I'm good with that.
Does it make sense to table this until we've heard more from the consultant, or should we vote on it and let it be what it will be?
We can table at any point during the discussion, but I'd like to ask a couple questions yet.
Sure.
Okay. On the flex service recommendation from the doctor, there wasn't a date on that. Is that a recent document?
Yeah, that's very recent.
Okay.
That was like last Wednesday.
Okay. And the flex, what is the flex service? What's that entail?
It allows the service to run at the license of the highest medical person on the service. So, and I should take that back. It would be not the person, but the person on the ambulance. So if we have an EMTA on the ambulance, we would be at an EMTA level, but if we had a basic on the ambulance, we would be at a basic level. So it changes the requirements. So if you had enough, you know, if for some reason, and in this case, what we're looking at is we're backing up Lake Mills EMS. So on any given day, what we're doing is we're running a all-call, and then we see who responds the fastest. And if we get 3 basics first, they're going out. And we're running at a basic level, and that's the flex. If we get an EMTA, then we're at the EMTA level, and so on and so forth. So that allows you to flex up and down according to what your personnel are. Lake Mills EMS has something similar. Their first ambulance out has to be an A, but everything else after that doesn't have to be. So it would allow us basically to run a service similar to them. Because we're not the primary, they are, it allows us to have more flex at the front end. So if what we're looking at is speed of getting somebody out the door. So if we get 3 basics, we're going to respond with 3 basics.
Okay.
This doesn't lock our license in forever either. So, you know, if at some point in time you decide next summer you decide you want to have A's, you can change that license. Or if you want to go to paramedics, you can change that license. You just have to reapply. At this point in time, we're trying to get the basic service in place to be able to provide the support. We don't want to jump off the bridge yet.
And speaking with the fire department, they've seemed pretty supportive of helping out in this project and moving things forward. I know that they have an ambulance at their disposal that they can't use at this point, that they're looking to put in play. And I guess I look at it as $60,000. I mean, putting a value on a cost of life is, I mean, I don't know where that value is, but $60,000 seems like a low investment to be able to offer service to the community that improves the service in the community. It's one of those, where do you put the cart, I guess. We have equipment available. We need to upgrade it to get it in use. This is how much it costs. There is a call for additional staffing from Lake Mills EMS to try to make sure that we have things properly staffed in the community. And there may be some question on how to go about doing that, but this is one solution that's being put out there tonight, I guess. So,
Again, I believe it's the best option in the long run, but I'm not opposed to, authorizing the upgrade of the service tonight and then holding off on the purchase of the equipment until later in the year. It depends, on how the services are responding, but I'm comfortable with that.
I mean, it was in our strategic plan that we came together and made sure that the safety of our citizens was like number one priority. And so when I think about this and think about that, we're not trying to take over the EMS, Lake Mills EMS, and at least be able to provide additional services. I don't think anyone would be opposed to that.
That does bring up a point that I read in the leader that I think there was a misquote in the leader. It said that the city voted to consider terminating its EMS contract. That is not the case. The city never voted to consider termination of the contract.
Last year we did.
Last September,
October.
Voted to consider terminating
We
the
authorized-
US contract.
Yeah.
We authorized the city manager to cancel the contract and start renegotiating.
Okay.
So basic.
So we issued that in October last year,
Yes.
the end of October.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
We were negotiating with them, and then they came back with a termination letter in February.
That's right.
And then, and they notified all the towns at that point too. And we continued to negotiate with them, but in fact, one of the options was the negotiated item. Option number 3 was what we essentially negotiated between the two groups. But we went through the full spread out of how it would lay out and those types of things. There were some items in option number 3 that were difficult to do, but I think option number 3, like I said, option 2A and 3 were right there. 2A is off the table now. You're not going to do that. So it's 3 or 2B or 4. So you're down the road now. But any one of those 3 options, other than the private vendor, and even the private vendor one, I would suggest you have your own backup ambulance. They all would have us have some sort of ambulance service in place.
Thank you. Any other comment, questions?
I guess I'd like to make some additional comment. I appreciate the insights from my fellow council members, and I think it is a sort of a tough decision on what to do about this, because I'm hearing some recommendations to move forward with this proposal because it will improve the service, but yet I'm also hearing, well, that's why we authorized a consultant to help us decide what to do. And so it does feel like they're, like you said, Greg, maybe where do you put the cart? Are we putting the cart first before the horse, or, are we moving ahead and then expecting our consultant to kind of catch up with us and work within what we've already authorized? So I'm a little torn, but I wonder if, rather than tabling this, as Mr. Wilkie suggested, I wonder if we could revise this to simply authorize the fire department to proceed with applying for the transporting license, but not authorize the expenditure of funds at this time, and then have the city manager bring back, bring back something in the future that would give us some options on how to pay for that.
I think what Mr. Wilkie had said earlier was that part of the authorization process is to have the ambulance in service, so it would require the $60,000 in equipment to get that licensing. Is that correct?
That's correct. But it's later on in the licensing process, but you're going to have to, at some point in time, if you're proceeding with the licensing, you're going to have to upgrade that, you're going to have to outfit that licensed ambulance.
So the 60,000 is going to be spent one way or the other.
Unless at some point in time you decide to withdraw that application.
Okay. Rip off the Band-Aid?
I'd like to see what other funds, I'd like to just have a little more time to think about what other funds could be used. In the grand scheme of our whole budget and the priority that emergency services is, maybe it's not that much money, but it's 10% of our ARPA funds. So it's a pretty big chunk of that money that's practically discretionary, that we would be using for this, that we could also maybe think of other things to use it for.
And one of the other options is if we get with a consultant, if they do join the two services, the fire department doesn't have to upgrade theirs because they'll still be working with and operating under the EMS's license then. So you wouldn't need to spend any of the money if that's the option that you go.
It would essentially become the city's license, Steve. So it would become under the Lake Mills EMS, which is a city department. So it would still be the city's license. It wouldn't be their license. So everybody that was working for the city would then be under that license.
Right, but you wouldn't have to go through this whole process. You've already got operating inspected ambulances. There'd be no change, and then you'd have plenty of time to work on the new ambulance to get it stocked up. Or you could even use stuff from maybe one of the other three if you joined them. And there's just a lot of options down the road. To me, it just seems like we're getting the cart way before the horses. That I don't see what 60. I mean, the service has been running for 51 years, and you're telling me that the next 6 weeks is going to be detrimental to the city. I guess I don't see how that's going to change.
I looked at it more from a different perspective, Steve, in that over the next 12 months, we already know how critical EMS services. There was another article in the municipal magazine this week about EMS and funds and those types of things. And so in order to be able to make sure that there are adequate staff available over the next 12 months is a different story than 6 weeks. And I'm concerned about that. And I think it's an issue that's only going to get worse, not better.
I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, I'd like to see a true operating budget and schedules and the operation plan. Like I've been saying before, I don't feel this is the right application for ARPA funds. This is a city department that should be standing on its own, and we should be using the ARPA funds for city-specific stuff, not a EMS district where you've always been the biggest proponent or against the townships are always able to come and use our services for free. Well, now you turn around and asking us to give them the money for free. Maybe they should pony up some of their ARPA money to match ours on a percentage basis, and that could be levied out as a per capita. We should be using this money to offset stuff that we don't have to borrow against.
If you watch how we do our budgeting and you follow along, our capital is assigned, whenever we borrow money, our capital is assigned on a percentage basis based on the levies on an annual basis to each one of the towns. So we don't, even if we used ARPA funds, we could assign the ARPA funds across all the towns that are participating, if there are any left, to be able to recollect those funds from them.
I guess all I'm saying is I was just looking for some kind of financial structure to show us that on paper. That's the whole idea of a budget. We just went through it with all the vehicles. roads, and I've been looking for that detail. That's what we've been asking for, is that detail.
And again, they were in my memo. Each one of the options had a budget that's exactly consistent with the way we've been doing the Lake Mills Town Fire Department for 20-some years. So if you look at how that's processed in the budget, you would follow that consistently through.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I think going back to purchasing the ambulance, I voted no because 6 months ago, we were basically no better off in terms of answers or decision-making than we are today, except for today we have decided to hire a consultant to get better answers. And today, Lake Mills EMS has said they can extend service out into the middle of 2023, which is a better position than we were 6 months ago. I don't think it hurts at this point to wait for our consultant's recommendation before we spend these funds. It seems like every time something regarding EMS comes up and city expenditures were being nudged more and more in a certain direction before we've made a decision. And I don't like that. So at this point, I would move to table this motion until after we receive the consultant's recommendations.
Did we want to do that, or did we want to go with Ms. Curler's suggestion with regard to the licensing, which would not require any funds? Just so that particular step is done, and then consider or discuss the funding issue or the purchasing after the consultant?
I'll just for the sake of it, I'll second the motion so that we can have discussion.
Sorry. Okay.
So motion to table for consultant recommendation by Mrs. Bishop and a second by Mr. Fields. So this is the question up for discussion right now. Go ahead, Ms. Quidnell.
Okay. I guess I'm a little jumpy today. Just in regard to what Mr. Wilkie had said, and also kind of following up what Ms. Curler said, hearing that there's no risk in doing the licensure piece. The funds are one way or the other. It sounds like it's going to be something we have to do if we decide to go in that direction. But the licensure issue, it doesn't appear like it's going to be as big of a financial burden moving forward.
Just to follow up on your comments there, just like what Steve said earlier, is it's going to take them a good 30 days just to put the paperwork together to get the application. So literally, the fire department has a month of just getting its own internal paperwork together, filling out the paperwork before they even submit anything to the state. Our consultant's already going to be on board. They could do all that without our direction right at the moment. They can get all their documents ready. We're not stopping them from doing that. All this would be is the actual submittal of the paperwork, which would happen the beginning of October anyways, when our consultant's already, and he should be giving us direction shortly after that. They could still move forward with getting all the paperwork and their operating procedures and everything else in place. That they can do without our direction.
Did you have something?
You had mentioned that the consultant would fill out the licensing stuff. He wouldn't do that. He would be making other recommendations. The medical director would do that for us.
I didn't say that. I said that the fire department getting all of their paperwork together, and they'll be ready. We'll have our consultant on board before they're ready to submit all the applications, because they're going to need time to put all their paperwork together. So we could even do a separate vote on just submitting that license in the beginning of October if we wanted to. We're not stopping them from doing the basics.
Yes.
When I asked what the operational plan entailed and the process for DHS review, it didn't sound like council authorization was required just to submit the license And so at that point, I think it's okay still to table this motion and not have any authorization of expenditures.
It's been said a couple of times that you need an ambulance to be able to transport, and that is a requirement of that license upgrade. Additionally, it hasn't been said, but I believe that the EMS did ask for support from the city in providing second ambulances, in helping them stay afloat until that last drop dead deadline that has been established as the end of June next year. I think you're also going against an issue here that just hasn't been spoken at all that you need to address, and that's the morale of the fire department. They've been on a wait and see here for a very long time. This is something that they want to get involved in. This is a need that they feel like they can fill, and I'm afraid of some backlash or a feeling of a lack of support if this doesn't move forward in a reasonable pace. Get moving on it. You've had a lot of time to work on this issue, and there should be some more resolution on this topic by this point.
Respectfully, Mr. Drescher, the backlash should be that the city council doesn't have an answer, and instead we've been provided by city staff with nothing but wild-ass guesses comprised of 6 options with no viable plans, which is why we had to go out and hire a consultant at the last meeting.
I agree.
Any other comment? Go ahead, Mr. Keller.
I guess a question / clarification. We do have an RFP out right now. I think it's another couple weeks before the deadline for submittal on that, for the staffing model analysis, and that requires response from the consultant by November 24th, 2022. So I don't know what the applications are looking like, but so that I just wanted to make sure then that we have a common understanding. If we would vote in favor of Mrs. Bishop's proposal to table, that would mean postponing this decision until at least the end of November. Am I understanding that right, all that timing?
Yes. All right.
One more thing.
Yes.
I'm sorry. We've been discussing the ARPA funds, and it's 10% of the ARPA budget. Please remind me, how long do we have to spend the ARPA funds?
25.
Okay. So when we look at the investment of 10% of our ARPA funds over the course of time, it seems to me to be a small investment over what would be a duration of time that we could fill in into capital improvement plans, the things that could potentially be spent, ARPA funds could be spent on this or that. I see that there's a good chance that we could that we could use the ARPA funds in different ways. I think this is crucial. I think this is something that we've literally been teeter-tottering for a year and a half over this. And I hear what you're saying, Ms. Bishop, and I hear what you're saying, Steve. I really, really do. I'm not disagreeing with you about making those purchases. I just want us to understand that I think when we look at the grand scheme of things in terms of the ARPA funds over the course of time, I really don't see the problem with spending those funds now to get this taken care of so we can handle those other projects or problems as they come up. If we don't do it now, it's just going to get delayed, and all of a sudden, now we have a $60,000 project that somebody else thinks is more important than having backup EMS services. And to me, with the population of folks that we have in our city, I think it's very important that we have backup EMS. No questions asked.
Any other comments, questions?
I guess just one comment, and I'm trying to find the numbers. Looks like it's about 202,000 was the purchase price for the ambulance that we authorized in February, and that was also ARPA funds. So just to be clear, we have spent probably, if we authorize this tonight, we will have spent close to half of our ARPA funds for the ambulance. So I just want to make sure that we're, regardless of how you vote, that we're just clear on how we're spending the funds.
And how would we use the rest of the funds? I keep hearing people say, well, we might have other projects to do. Like what?
We looked at like water main projects. They qualify sanitary sewer projects, park projects. There were certain types of computer projects. So like we did the meeting system in here. Instead of having to have the headphones on and the mics, we upgraded that. That was part of our ARPA funds. That was $50,000. So there are other things that can be used like that.
But I think that that's rather petty. When we look at the grand investment of what is our job? Our job is to represent the people that live here, right? And would they really like us spending money on equipment? Or, I'm sorry, on infrastructure type things that, yeah, they're important, but they're not people's lives. That's what I'm looking at. I hear what you're saying. I hear what all of you are saying, but I guess I'm at this point right now where, you know, the amount of people that I have in my life that are loved ones are of that age that would need that backup service. So I think it's important that we have that promptly.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so the question before us is the tabling for consultant recommendations. Do we need any further explanation to that before we go into a roll call vote on that? So we're voting on the tabling for consultant recommendations. Roll call, please.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quednow?
No.
Mr. Waters?
No.
Ms. Curler?
No.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
So the motion failed 2-3.
Thank you.
So we are back to the question of motion 22-8-2-4, which is authorizing Lake Mills Fire Department service level upgrade and ARPA funds expenditure to outfit and bring ambulance into service. Any further questions or comments on that question? Yes.
To follow up on some of the discussion and debate regarding the motion, but it is now applicable to this vote, nobody is saying that EMS services and that lives are not important. What I want before making this decision and this expenditure is additional information, specifically information that this council requested in a 5-0 vote at the last meeting when we asked for a consultant on this issue. If this issue were tabled until we received that consultant's information, in conjunction with that information, if it was supported, I would vote yes on this expenditure. At this point in time, we don't have that, and I'll be voting no tonight.
Any other comments or questions? So Lisa, you had put something out there earlier about authorizing the application process. But that would still require the investment down the road within a 60-day window probably, right?
Let's go back to what we've been talking about. It's going to take probably 30 days to get the application, right? You don't think so? Oh, okay. So let's say we get that submitted and it starts moving through. We could at least at the next meeting present different options for financing it.
So you're recommending that we hold on this until you will have a more itemized understanding of the budget that, and closer, more detailed understanding of what we're going to be spending it on, so that we can vote more intelligently?
Was that a recommendation or was it just a statement?
Well, I was wondering, by a more itemized idea of what the budget is, what I was suggesting initially was, that there are other funding mechanisms besides ARPA. The additional funding items, I provided what I believe are relatively accurate. I have to agree, and I'm not going to deny it. They're kind of wild ass guesses, but I used the best information I had available to me. I'm pretty sure that based on the information I've had, the consultants will believe that it's relatively accurate. It's not going to be perfect. They're going to add things that I don't know because they're EMS people, I'm not. But I could have it, I could provide you with a special, everything is already budgeted in the general fund budget. Most of the EMS activities are going to occur in the special revenue fund that would be EMS, and I can provide you with that, with the information that I've already provided you in the same form. But it would at least be in that ClearGov one, consistent with the other ones.
So if I'm understanding you, it sounds like you're offering, you're suggesting that we could authorize the fire department to move forward with applying for the license for transporting level, and that you would provide funding options for us and additional details on how this could be financed, how the equipment purchase could be financed at a future meeting. Am I
correct?
Understand that?
That's the basis of it, and then I added that I could put together a special revenue fund that would have the budget, but it would be consistent with what I provided in my memos before. So if you don't like my wild ass guesses, it's not going to be worth much.
Did I hear Steve Fields say that we do not need to, there doesn't need to be action by the council in order to have them
I said that.
license?
And Danny verified it.
That is accurate. This was meant to come before the council for support, and specifically because of the ARPA fund expenditure that's been proposed. They can take steps to upgrade their level of service without council acquiescence.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to table motion 22-8-2-4 to the next city council meeting and ask the city manager to bring additional financing information for the proposed expenditure.
Second.
There's a motion to table to the next meeting by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Any discussion on the tabling to the next meeting? All right, seeing none, let's have a roll call on the tabling to the next meeting.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, item E. Discussion decision on Sandy Beach Public Survey. This is motion 22-8-2-5. Can we have a reading of that motion, please?
A motion 22-8-2-5 directing the city manager to authorize the Survey Research Center of the University of Wisconsin River Falls to proceed with the Sandy Beach Community Survey.
All right. Can we have a motion?
I move to approve motion 22-8-2-5, directing the city manager to authorize the Survey Research Center of the University of Wisconsin River Falls to proceed with the Sandy Beach Community Survey.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mr. Fields. Staff comment?
You had requested that I find somebody to do a survey for us. I talked to Steve Chamelski. Steve, are you on? Okay, he was gonna see if he could be on tonight. We had some conversation about the structure that we wanted, and I talked about being able to get something that was divided up into the 5 categories of the surrounding towns and the city, and then being able to get some relatively confident information on what citizens in the area desired for food service. He put together the initial proposal, which is the River Falls study. He did talk about being able to back off of this somewhat and not needing this strong of a survey, but we thought we'd start out with one that was a pretty high quality one that we could get done in a relatively short period of time. So this is the survey I brought forward. I was hoping he'd be on tonight so he could talk more about if he needed to back off on the level of the survey. But if you don't want this much, I can go and find out. It's just that, like, what is a Survey Monkey and those types, they're just kind of you don't get a real statistically accurate understanding of what you want to have happen. This is going to be in the category that you can be relatively confident in the numbers that are being put forward and give you a good idea of, if you're going to spend that kind of money, this is what the community thinks.
He talks about in his write-up here about the 3 different drafts. Are we going to be putting like a committee to work with him too to kind of steer in some directions what we're thinking also, or is this something that they're putting together on their own and just submitting to us, and then we get to kind of finesse it a little bit? I guess, how does the process work?
They're going to put it together, and then they're going to submit it to us and ask us if we want anything. So if you want a committee to do that, that's great. Lisa and I kind of worked on some questions together and used that as the basis for the information and the ideas that we were trying to flesh out. And this is what he came back with. But he also said that before they ran the survey, it would come back to the city. So
he said in his write-up, he says if it goes back and forth more than 3 times, then there's additional charges. So I was kind of wondering if we can get it kind of really close the first time so we don't go back and forth too often.
Yeah, and I didn't think of any other committee other than the city council. I mean, you guys have been intimately involved with it from the beginning, and so I thought everyone would feel more comfortable with that.
Any other questions?
I'll just add on when Steve said that he and I worked on some questions. That was right after the council voted to seek citizen input, and Steve asked me if I had some ideas for, what the kinds of questions. So I sent him a few thoughts, and you probably have been working on that. But it's really just trying to gauge, like you said, what level, do you want food service at all? Do you think, do you think the city should, build a restaurant? And if you want food service, what type would you prefer? And how often would you come there? Those kinds of basic questions, I guess.
You'll still have opportunities to review it and spread it out. Like Steve said, they'll give you up to 3 opportunities to review it and finalize it. But that was the basis of the conversation, was pretty much write down the food service, and if you want food service, how far and what type of restaurant and those types of things.
In reading through his write-up, this can happen pretty quickly, it looks like.
Yes, yeah, I asked if he could get it done quickly, and that was the first thing he checked. And that's kind of why he went to them, because they can kick it out pretty quick, because they have students doing it with a professor.
Yes.
I'd like to make a recommendation to draw down the scope of this survey and the people polled. I don't want to spend our city's taxpayer dollars to poll people outside of the city on how we're going to spend our city's taxpayer dollars. As Michelle Quinnell said, our job is to represent the people that live here. And so I'd want to reduce the scope of this to just the city of Lake Mills and polling the citizens that live here. Also, had a second point. Oh, the cost. Are we going to start? I think we need to be careful with the cost, because I don't think we need to start spending $5,000 on surveys for every community issue that comes up. Now, Sandy Beach has been going on for a long time. There are a lot of parts to this project. A lot of citizens can feel a lot of different ways. This may be a case where it's worth spending the money here, again, to poll our citizens. But I think we just need to be careful about these type of expenditures moving forward.
I've historically been criticized for exactly the same thoughts. I've always believed that we represent the city and that that's an important part of it. We discussed earlier about the community being involved. A lot of people here think that the community is a much broader section than the city. That's why I asked, okay, if we're going to allow people to respond from a broader area, I would like to be able to find out who, where they're from and what kind of impact they had on the statistics. And so that's why it was laid out that way. When we did the survey, which was a very, very basic kind of survey monkey poll for the comprehensive plan, anybody could have filled it out. If you lived in Tomahawk, you could have filled it out. So this was a little bit more of a, we're going to randomly select people from those areas. We're going to be able to notice, what their area is, and we're going to be able to separate it out. And then the council can make an informed decision on how often people from outside the city are using it, what their thoughts are. That'll definitely impact how the restaurant is used, obviously. But again, I wanted it separated out so that you knew what the city residents wanted apart from that.
So I guess there's a cost to some of our decisions. Request or survey, and the feedback that comes back is a $5,000 roughly cost to do the survey. I'm not sure if it would change if we change the scope, if that would have an impact on the price at all.
I'm sure it would.
Okay.
I think it would reduce the required sample size for the the confidence rate or whatever it's called.
Right, and it would make it easier to determine who is applying, because they'd only use city addresses.
And this would come out of city council budget, I would imagine, yes.
Continues to be, yeah.
The feedback and criticism that Mr. Wilkie says he's received, from a variety of people in our community, we're all going to receive that too. We received it at Plan Commission about how to do the comprehensive survey better. There's no end to that type of feedback. And so at some point you do just need to make a decision, and I recognize that. The additional information that could be sought from people outside the community who would want to come here, why people are coming to Lake Mills in the first place, would they utilize services at Sandy Beach, really sound like a feasibility study that a developer should be doing. And I don't think that that's our role here.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Just a couple of thoughts. I think you're right, Catherine. It's interesting that, in a way, we are putting ourselves, though, in the role of a developer, of a potential developer of a restaurant, right? If we're going to own it or if we're going to lease that space. So there, there has been studies, and feasibility analyses so far. And I think with all of the expenses that are, for our city residents that are going to be coming in future years, I think, to me, it's worth the cost of doing a well-done, scientifically sound survey to think about, is a restaurant at Sandy Beach one of those expenditures that people in the city want us to focus on? Because there's a lot of other important things, going on as well. So I see your point about narrowing the scope. I think people in the neighboring townships would come to the beach and would use the food services, but they wouldn't be paying for that infrastructure. So their input is maybe not, quite the same. I wonder, and this doesn't need to necessarily be in this document, but I wonder if we are going to use the survey to talk to city, or to have city residents asked about their perspectives, would we want to have a couple of open-ended questions, or an open-ended question and a couple of additional questions about the rest of Sandy Beach, as long as we're asking them? There's questions, people have opinions about the manufactured home community, about the other park improvements, and, as long as we're asking, if you can add a couple more questions and narrow the scope to only ask city residents, I can't imagine that it would cost more.
Yeah, and as long as you're meeting with them, they can up and down the scope of the project those 3 times. Once you get over that 3 times, then it's going to be a problem. But I think this is the max, and if you narrow the scope but you ask more questions, I think you can keep it within this group.
I would agree with that, Mrs. Curler, adding a couple of additional questions. We're already doing the survey, putting it out there. Why don't we get that feedback as well at the same time?
I guess I'm kind of at the point where the feedback I'm getting from the community is just make a decision and let's move forward on this. and I think we're all seeing that in our feedback from the community, the letters that we're getting. Just make a decision. So the longer we push this out, the longer we add to this, the longer it'll take to make a decision here. We want to make the right decision for the community. I think we all had plenty of time to gather information since spring, and I think we all pretty much have positions at this point. It would be nice to get feedback, since we waited this long for the survey, to go ahead and push forward with this, but I don't want to prolong the situation where it takes another couple months to get these results back. So I'd like to turn this around as quick as possible and do what we can to stick to a September timeline. Any other questions, comments? So we have discussion points out there. There's a motion. (22-8-2-5). Let's look at that quickly. So the city manager is authorized to sign and prepare a proposal for the community survey. So we need to work with the city manager to fine-tune this survey.
No, actually, what I'll do is, if you're comfortable, I'll talk to him about what we discussed tonight, and if he feels that falls within the scope of that, then I'll just sign that contract, and then you guys can work with him over the next couple meetings to be able to finalize what you're looking for, and then they can get that survey out. If it's not within the, if it takes a different contract, then I won't sign it, and we'll be back again.
All right, we good with that?
Maybe just to clarify, because I think the major suggestion from this discussion was to narrow the scope of who gets included in the survey. And so you're saying if you can do that with crossing something out on it and signing the agreement or something, then you would just go ahead and do that?
Yeah, I think you're going to have that option through the meetings that you have to be able to expand and contract how you want to see the survey work, but I'll make sure and check.
And to negotiate a lower price.
I think what we'll do is we'll leave it flexible enough so that if you want to add questions to see how it rises and falls, we'll work through that.
All right. Any other questions or comments? So we know the rough idea of the price tag and the scope at this point. We're looking at narrowing the scope of the City of Lake Mills and looking at other Sandy Beach issues. There's no other discussion. We're looking at a roll call for motion 22-8-2-5.
Mr. Waters?
Aye?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quendow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item F is Resolution 22-42A, acceptance of public improvements and reductions of financial guarantee, Topel Service Center redevelopment. Resolution 22-42A. I may have just read that whole motion, but can you do that again, Lori?
Resolution 22-42A, approval of required improvements and reduction of financial guarantee, Topel Service Center redevelopment.
Fantastic. Can we have a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 22-42A, approval of required improvements and reduction of financial guarantee for Topel Service Center redevelopment.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. Staff comment?
We talked about this one quite a bit at the last meeting. We wordsmithed it to come up with something that moved along the lines of what was discussed at that time. So instead of acceptance, we said approval. And we just said that we would accept the developer's warranty through their contractor rather than requiring our own. So there would be no retainage. So that's pretty much the summary of that change.
Right. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, can we have a roll call for Resolution 22-44? Nope.
42.
22-42A.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quendow?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is Resolution 22-44, which is the reduction of financial guarantee, Tyranena Point Subdivision. Can you read Resolution 22-44?
Could you read it for me,
Was that the same thing?
please?
I can read it. Resolution 22-44, acceptance of public improvements and release of Phase 2 financial guarantee for Tyranena Point subdivision.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 22-44, acceptance of public improvements and release of Phase 2 financial guarantee for Tyranena Point subdivision.
Second.
I think I heard this correctly. Motion by Mrs. Curler, second by Mrs. Bishop.
Yes.
Okay, great. Staff comment?
The phase 1 and 2 of Tyranena Point have been completed and actually completed their warranty period, 1-year warranty period here recently. So staff is recommending that, the developer has requested and staff is recommending that we release the letter of credit, or actually the escrow requirement from the developer, so that they can get their money out of Hawk. It's a little bit different. They used an escrow rather than a letter of credit. So they hold an escrow account that we require, and then you guys get to allow them to pull that off, and they use this resolution to notify the bank that that's occurred. So we've accepted all the public improvements. They now get to get their money free.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, can we have a roll call on Resolution 22-44?
Yes. Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quendow?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Resolution 22-44 is the authorizing the city manager execute an agreement with Civic Systems, LLC, to purchase accounting software program.
Did you say 44 or 45?
Should be 22-45. Thank you for the correction. Can we have a reading of that? Actually, it was the same thing I just read, so we'll keep that on record.
Need a motion?
Need a motion on Resolution 22-45.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 22-45, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Civic Systems LLC to purchase accounting software program.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Staff discussion.
We discussed this a little bit earlier. It's actually going to be in next year's budget. But they are at the point where they need us to make a commitment so that they can get it done by the time we need it for the next budget. So Sam, you have anything you want to add?
With talking with Mike from Civic, he said in order to start a July 1 start date, which is what I would like to implement, so I have 6 months old system, 6 months on the new, they will be able to bring in that 6 months into the new system, but in order to do a 6 or 7/1 start date, they need a signed contract now to get the process going, because they have several municipalities switching from WPPI, which is no longer going to be supported, switching to Civic System. So to get into their schedule and do a 7/1 start date, it needs to be signed as soon as possible.
So I'm sorry, the go-live date's July 1st?
July 1. of
Okay.
Of next year?
Next year, 2023.
Any other questions?
Mr. Waters.
Yes.
I see that this is going to be split 4 ways with utilities, but I just blanked on my words. How are we funding this? Because ARPA funds could be one thing. Other capital improvements we've used borrowing for, so what's the plan here?
Historically, we'd have borrowed the general funds portion. The utilities have the fund balance to pay for theirs, so 3/4 of it's going to be cash out of their accounts, and then the city portion would be borrowed on a loan rather than bond.
So we're going to borrow what is that, $16,000 for this?
Yeah, probably. You could use unreserved fund balance, but again, you don't have the capacity in your operating funds to do it. So it's either going to be unreserved fund balance or borrow for it.
How long did we use the dynamic system?
Probably since 2004.
Okay.
But that doesn't include, so there's the 16,000 city is paying for like the upfront cost, and then I thought I saw an additional 16,000 per year for ongoing maintenance and support.
And
Okay,
that's split.
16, okay, so then a quarter of that is 4,000 to the city. Where is the city paying that 4,000?
Operations.
Okay.
That'll be kind of a capital line item or an operations line item. They'll say like a service contract. So if you look under service contracts, a lot of them, when you get the new way that ClearGov will work, there'll be the line item if it has an arrow, a carrot at the front of it. You click on that, it'll drop down, and there'll be all the associated contracts associated with it. So like service contracts, sometimes we have it in capital just because it's easier to keep track of it there, but capital in the operations area is still out of operating funds, not borrowed.
I think you guys know where I'm headed with this. I'd rather just go ahead and pay 16 grand out of the unreserved fund balance. I'm curious if Ms. Bell has an opinion on that. If not, that's fine, but that's my preference at this point.
Are we allowed to amortize software as a city?
I don't know. There may be an established,
Microphone, please.
See?
Can't hear you, Dan, I'm sorry.
The amortization,
we're talking about 16 grand. I mean.
I know.
Like,
So let's
we
just
have
pay for
plenty
it.
of funds in the unreserved fund.
Right, that's
You
my
have
point.
ARPA funds available. Why are we talking about amortizing this or borrowing money for this expenditure? It's ridiculous.
I agree.
Well, it's 72,000, right?
yeah, but it's only
The utility is
16.
paying 3/4 of it, and they're running revenue. They have cash on hand.
So we're talking about a 15-year loan term or more if we go to bond for $16,000 that we can just pay. That's my only point here.
Well, we don't do, on the loan ones, we don't do 15 to 20 years. Those are bonded ones, and they're scheduled different. But the reason I say both options are there is because at some point in time, the unreserved fund balance isn't going to be an option. So you want to watch your numbers on the unreserved fund balance. If that's always the conversation for any item that you're purchasing that's not bondable or a reasonable loan, you need to be careful on how you fund that.
Right, but for 16 grand for something that we're gonna use for probably the next 20 years, hopefully maybe 15, depending on technology. I mean, last time I checked in the unreserved fund balance, there was like at least $1 million.
There is $1 million, but you have to realize that our revenue streams don't come in at a normal stream. So that unreserved fund balance carries us through a lot of unusual areas. And it's also something that you use in case of emergencies or unforeseen situations that come up through the course of the year. So you want to be careful, and I can send you a ton of information on unreserved fund balance. When I got here, it was $123,000.
Let's just use council funds.
ARPA funds, let's use up some of the ARPA funds.
It's a conversation that you need to have as part of the idea of using it.
In the budget process.
Yes. Which will be, you have that opportunity to discuss it then. Because this won't happen for a year.
Anything else?
So hold on, can I take a second and look at the resolution? Because we're voting on the dollar amount, right? Saying it's going to be split 4 ways, but does it specify?
And then it's got the annual support and annual
No,
hosting fee.
it doesn't
Resolution
specify.
doesn't say how
Okay.
it's funded. Well, other than the utilities.
So when we go to pay this contract, well, we have to pay half of it now, which is 8 grand.
Actually, the half is, right now, or what we would have to pay when the contract is signed is $35,900.
Right, and the city's
Divided by four would be $8,975 per the
Per
general
department.
water, sewer, electric. The $16,527 in support will actually be half of that cost if I do a July 1 start date, that is as go live. This support includes just their annual support as well as cloud support. We saved about $4,000 a year going with them with the cloud service versus adding another server and our service with the new server, which would be like $10,000 a month on top of Civic's annual support. So we went with the cloud server with Civic.
Thanks for explaining that.
So to go ahead and pay the city's part that's due to execute the contract, where is that money coming from? How are you going to pay it like tomorrow?
They would send us an invoice once we get the signed contract, yes, for the $35,900.
And it would probably be paid out of unreserved funds balance because we haven't taken out a loan for it. Okay. Thank you.
Or if you choose to use ARPA funds, whatever you choose to use.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so we have Resolution 22-45 before us. Can we have a roll call on that?
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quendow?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ordinance 1239. Lori, can you read? This is a third reading, so I guess we go all the way through it. So Lori, can you read that tonight?
Sure. Ordinance 1239, amending City of Lake Mills Ordinance Section 660-44, official zoning map, City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel identification number 018-0713-1214-002, owner Kingbird Real Estate, the second LLC, W7411 County Road V, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. The City Council of the City of Lake Mills, Jefferson County, Wisconsin does ordain as follows. Section 1, City of Lake Mills, Ordinance Section 660-44A, the official zoning ordinance and map of the City of Lake Mills are hereby amended upon annexation of the subject parcel by the City of Lake Mills to zone the following described 2.322 acres identified by parcel identification number 018-0713-1214-002 and address W7411 County Road V, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, from Rural Development RD to Planned Business PB as depicted in the attached map, which is incorporated herein. Section 2, all ordinances or parts of ordinances inconsistent with or contravening the provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed. The ordinance shall be in full force and effect upon passage and publication as provided by law.
Thank you. So this is a third reading, so we will need a motion for Ordinance 1239.
I'm going to move to table. Excuse me, I didn't have my microphone on. Move to table the vote on Ordinance 1239 for the zoning amendment request for Ryan Malone until after the City Council can discuss and vote. Well, first have the third reading and then discuss and vote on the CUP ordinance.
So there's a motion to table for the CP ordinance by Mrs. Bishop. Is there a second? One more time, is there a second for the tabling for the CP ordinance?
I'll second so we can have discussion.
Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Mr. Fields. So the question is the tabling. That's what's open for discussion right now. Did you want to go into more detail, Mrs. Bishop?
So, yeah, I'm not sure I stated that very clearly. My motion was to table until after the third reading of my CUP ordinance for lodging. And that's because I think there are a lot of considerations and discussion that this council needs to have and a decision made on how CUPs will be applied to planned business districts, and I'm forgetting the other district where lodging is allowed. I think it's downtown business.
Downtown.
I think we need to have that discussion and decision and the third reading before we make a final decision on this ordinance for the rezoning of this plot.
So to clarify, the ordinance Mrs. Bishop is talking about is ordinance 1242, which is the item L on our agenda tonight, and it's the second reading for that item tonight. So
I guess my question is, would the ordinance 1242 change any of the requirements or issues of this particular zoning amendment?
My proposed ordinance 1242, which is later on the agenda and due for a second reading tonight,
Correct.
would require a conditional use permit for lodging in a planned business district, which this lot is proposed to be rezoned to. So with a CUP, there would be additional requirements on the lot. It goes to Plan Commission first, there's a public hearing, and then it comes up to the City Council for a final decision. So that's sort of the process that would be imposed by my ordinance.
Thank you for clarifying. I guess my only, the reason why I seconded it is I definitely wanted a discussion to understand it. My only challenge with this is if they started this process before we started this amendment, I would struggle with the idea of holding up their process so that we could get some new requirements put on them. I think that would be a challenge or wouldn't look best for us.
And my understanding, I'll just go ahead and answer real quick, Mr. Fields, is that nothing has been started because there hasn't been a rezoning yet. So the CUP process at this point would be able to give the city the input that we want on this type of development.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to add additional burden to them after they had already started the process. That wouldn't be, to me, that wouldn't be fair.
So,
if they were,
I'm sorry, Mr. Fields, go ahead.
no, if they were following the rules or the systems that we had in place at the time, I didn't want to add something to it while they were in the process of it.
And
That
this
wouldn't be
would-
fair.
Right, and this would make sure that lodging across the board is also consistent with those requirements. So that's what that other ordinance would do.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we have representatives from the Ryan Malone group here tonight. I saw a hand go up in the audience, so there'd be a need to suspend the rules to allow them to talk at this point.
I moved to suspend the rules so that they could talk to the council.
Second.
So motion to suspend by Mr. Fields, second by Ms. Curler. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
That's 5-0. Please state your name and give us a breakdown.
Hello, I'm Ryan Malone. I represent Kingbird Realty II. We are located in Delafield, Wisconsin. We started this project 2 years ago, I believe. So when we started talking about it, we reached out to the city, had meetings, COVID hit, so that kind of diverted us for probably a year and a half. We came back, and the plan was we own the land already. We've got our architect and our general contractor already lined up. We have well over $500,000 invested in this project already. And now we're up against a potential change. And we're looking at probably $15 million investment total.
What timeline are you looking at on this project?
Our goal was to get in the ground this fall and just get the groundwork moved, the earth moved, and then start construction in spring.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Malone. All right, so the question before us is the tabling for the CP ordinance, which was Ordinance 1242. Is there any other discussion or comment? If not, we'll move to roll call on the tabling.
I have one more comment,
Yep.
Mr. Waters, and that's just to reiterate at the last meeting when I introduced the CUP ordinance. I did reiterate, well, I stated briefly what a conditional use permit would require and the issues that it would address that the city should consider. And so I'll reiterate those briefly when we're considering this motion to table this rezoning. Some of those considerations for your CUP include adverse impact, whether there's adverse or detrimental effect upon or endanger adjacent property, the character of the area, or the public health and safety, morals, comfort, and general welfare. Any interference with the surrounding development, whether there will be adequate public facilities, traffic congestion, and this says destruction of significant features, so proposed use and development will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any natural, scenic, or historic feature of significant importance. I'm not saying specifically that Mr. Malone's property will do any of those things or that all of those considerations apply, but some of them certainly apply, and it is in the city's discretion to have solid planning and development and to take those things into consideration with this type of development. And that's why I'm yet again asking for this council to postpone a decision on the rezoning for one more meeting until a discussion and decision can be made on the CUP ordinance.
I have a question.
Yes?
So, and maybe this has been said and I just am not grasping it. Because of the order of these ordinances, to understand that if we do the rezoning for Ordinance 1241 for Mr. Malone, and then we pass Ordinance 1242, does that mean that that 1242 does not pertain to his property when time comes?
So we're talking 1239 is the,
sorry.
is the
You're
ordinance
right.
right now. So you're asking if we pass 1242 next week, would the motion we pass this week fall under that compliance?
Correct.
I would have to refer to Mr. Drescher.
I don't know. At this point, I think that from a kind of a global perspective in reviewing the issue, the group that is bringing forth the ordinance to amend the zoning of this particular property and to build it out have certainly relied on the law as it's stated right now in their planning and their development and their investment. And if you do change that and require more in the future, I would see where that would offend them and you could potentially face a claim. I'm not really willing or ready to say that that claim does or does not have merit at this point. I am under the same understanding at this point in time that nothing has been permitted, that there are no finalized plans with regard to the development itself, and that it may be a harmless change in that they can incorporate it into their plan and move forward under a conditional use permit on that particular site. but at the very least, it would be, a new consideration for them. I'm not ready to say that it either is or is not, but I think the timing is very, very important, and what steps have been taken along the way, and the reliance issue is very important to examine before shutting the door on what they've already done and requiring that extra conditional use permit in the future. So my answer is I don't know, but it kind of has, a little bit of smoke and potentially there's fire there.
I think historically what we've tried to do is, let's say they get their BSO approved before the conditional use permit one that Mrs. Bishop has proposed, that would be allowed. Because all this does is give them zoning. Once they file for that BSO and it goes under a conditional use permit that's been passed, so let's say at the September 2nd meeting, they didn't have anything ready to go, and they submit it after September 2nd, we would require them to come in for the conditional use permit. That's the way I would think about it. Historically, what you don't want to do is have someone have all their permits in place and then change the code on them. So these people have moved along, like Dan said, with the understanding of that this is where they're at and this is what they can do. And if they were able to get everything completed before the timeline of the conditional use permit proposal being in place, they would be able to build.
So they would be grandfathered in a way?
Yes.
Okay.
Grandfather probably isn't the right choice of words, but
Sorry.
they would, their permit would be under the existing code, not the proposed code.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you, Mr. Drescher.
It's not really clear.
Trying to.
That answers your question?
It does.
It's clear as mud?
About that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we are voting on the tabling for ordinance 1242. Excuse me?
1239.
We're tabling ordinance 1239 for the, we're tabling it until ordinance 1242 has been reviewed, basically, right?
Until after the third reading and the debate and discussion that comes along with that and decision, regardless of what.
1242.
Yes.
But we haven't voted on the tabling yet.
Correct. So a yes vote would table ordinance 1239 at this point. All right? Are we all clear on that? All right. So can we have a roll call on the motion to table ordinance 1239?
Ms. Gwendow?
I have to be first. No.
Mr. Waters?
No.
Ms. Curler?
No.
Mrs. Bishop?
Yes.
And Mr. Fields?
No.
Motion passes.
No,
One.
motion fails to table.
Oh, sorry.
Ordinance 1239. So now we are back to the,
Motion failed.
now we are back to ordinance 1239, which has not had a motion made on it quite yet.
So I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 1239, the zoning amendment request from Ryan Malone for the purpose of changing the zoning from rural development to planned business.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Staff comment.
The recommendation from the Plan Commission was to approve it. And it's consistent with what the long-term plans were. So if, Dustin, you want to comment on it all?
I don't see Dustin up there.
Certainly.
Oh, there.
Certainly, sorry. Yeah, yes, this parcel has been planned for in the future land use in the comprehensive plan, which was adopted in '06. It shows this area for planned business. The annexation is consistent with recommendations of that plan for development along that corridor and at that intersection. And again, the rezoning is consistent with long-range plans that we have earmarked for this area. Now, we did not discuss specific uses for the site. The planned business district does allow for a variety of uses, though obviously this petitioner is looking to construct a hotel.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Any questions or comments? All right. So roll call for ordinance 1239.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
And Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
All right. So item J is ordinance 1240, which is a third reading. Lori, can you read ordinance 1240, please?
Actually, I only have to read the title. So it would be ordinance 1240, amending City Code Chapter 38.
This is a third reading. I believe you have to read the whole thing. I know
Mr.
that
Waters?
the motion is so that you don't have to read the whole thing in the future.
Mr. Waters, this is Misty.
Hi, Misty.
Only a first reading requires a full reading. Second and third are by title only.
Okay.
If you'd like her to read the full thing, though, you can definitely request it, and she will.
I just wanted to follow the rules, and I thank you for...
I know, and this one's kind of confusing, especially seeing what this ordinance amendment is about. So I apologize for the confusion.
Thank you. Does
Okay.
Everyone good with where we're at right here? Mm-hmm. All right.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Okay,
So,
I
so,
think she needs to read the full title because she didn't
Yes.
quite all the way through it.
Go ahead.
okay. Chapter 38, City Council, Section 38-3, Meetings, Rules of Procedure.
All right, thank you. Can we have a motion?
I move to adopt ordinance 1240, amending City Code Chapter 38, City Council, Section 38-3, Meetings, Rules of Procedure.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mrs. Bishop. Staff comment?
Misty, do you have anything you want to add?
This was just my request to try to make this go a little bit easier. Motions and resolutions are just by title. And just like I kind of stated before, at any point at any time, a full reading could be requested. It's just trying to streamline things and help us out, especially with these long agendas and long ordinances.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, let's go to roll call for ordinance 1240.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
And Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is ordinance 1241. This is the second reading. Lori, can you read the title, please?
Yes. Ordinance number 1241, an ordinance annexing territory to the city of Lake Mills, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, parcel identification number 018-0713-1113-039.
All right, this is the second reading, so no need for a motion at this point. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's move on to ordinance 1242. This is also a second reading. Can you please read the title here?
Ordinance 1242, zoning ordinance amending section 660-56, land use regulations in the matrix of land uses, commercial indoor lodging.
Again, second reading, so no need for a motion here. Is there any discussion here? This was what we touched on earlier in the meeting by Mrs. Bishop. Seeing none, let's move on to item M, which is ordinance 1243. This is a first reading. Lori, can you read ordinance 1243?
Ordinance 1243, amending City of Lake Mills Ordinance, Section 660-44, official zoning map, City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel identification number 246-0713-1241-050. Owner 454 Tyranena Park, LLC, 454 Tyranena Park Road, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. The City Council of the City of Lake Mills, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, does ordain as follows. Section 1, City of Lake Mills, Ordinance Section 660-44A. The official zoning ordinance and map of the City of Lake Mills are hereby amended to zone the following described 0.745 acres identified by parcel number 246-0713-1241-050 and address 454 Tyranena Park Road, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, from planned industrial PI to single family residential R1-4 as depicted in the attached map, which is incorporated herein. Section 2, all ordinance or parts of ordinance inconsistent with or contravening the provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed. Section 3, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect upon passage and publication as provided by law.
Thank you. So that was the first reading of ordinance 1243. I see that Mr. Wollin had wrote an email addressed to council. Can we get that included in the notes for further readings? Does that make sense? Okay, fantastic.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Since the next item is also a first reading, now that we've adopted 1240, can Lori simply read the title?
It hasn't been published yet. It's been adopted, but it hasn't been published. We have to give
It has to be
everybody
published.
notice.
Okay, great.
Sorry, Lori.
Thank you.
That was the first question Dwayne asked, and it ain't in yet.
Oh, well, not yet.
Mr. Waters.
Do you want, oh, sorry.
No,
I was going
go
to
ahead.
ask if you want the planner to go over what happened at, his memo and then what happened at Plan Commission.
Sure, I guess we can do that now. Normally, we would discuss that on the third reading, right? But we're good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dustin.
I see Dustin's here. We might as well use him.
Thank you. This is a situation where we have a single-family property or home. It's been historically used for single-family in an area that has developed with surrounding properties all being various types of industrial or light industrial development. There are a handful of these in the community. These are sites that were developed prior to being part of the city. It does make for some awkward situations. Mr. Wollin's letter does talk about how he is being assessed, and yes, in the state of Wisconsin, we have use assessment, so it's based on how you use the property, not specifically how it's zoned or planned for. The memo we show you a couple of graphics. One shows a clipping from the 2003 city zoning map that shows the area for I-2, warehousing and manufacturing, and then from the updated zoning map that shows it for planned industrial. That entire area is properties zoned for planned industrial. The discussion at the Plan Commission level was that, and staff's concerns here, is the request to rezone it to single family would create an isolated single family parcel in the middle of an industrial zoned area. This zoning of current zoning of planned industrial does certainly limit how much development or redevelopment or improvements can be made on the property, because the single family home is not a permitted use within the planned industrial district, but it can be used and it can be maintained as a single family home. But there are other options available to this house. It certainly could be used for light industrial or office type activities. There certainly is the ability to do make improvements to the site that are in keeping with the planned industrial zoning district, which does include a building addition or an accessory building that can be used for light industrial. We'll even call it like kind of incubator type, small scale light industrial activities. But there are requirements that have to be met associated with that, right? The building, there are design guidelines. Mr. Wollin was looking to put up a metal pole building, which we don't allow by code. I know that there are other buildings out there that were constructed many decades ago that are metal sided, but we do have some minimum requirements that probably was not in keeping with what he had in mind for the property. We did go through the findings with the Plan Commission. And again, at the end, the Plan Commission felt that the proposed amendment to a single family district is contrary to the purpose of the zoning code and create that isolated residential property, that this amendment wouldn't be consistent with land uses and intensity and development of the area, and that an amendment wouldn't be consistent with the trend of development in this area, which is industrial and commercial development, and that the proposed zoning amendment wouldn't be consistent with the comp plan in minimizing conflicts between uses and harmonizing complementary uses in that area. With that, I can answer any questions that you may have, and certainly Ms. Bishop may have some thoughts as well from her attendance in that meeting.
I guess I have one question. Did the existing petitioner, Mr. Wollin, did he own this property before it was annexed and changed to the planned industrial?
No,
I'm
he did.
going to ask Mr. Wilkie to answer that, but my understanding is no.
Yeah,
So he
no.
purchased it in this area knowing that it was in an industrial area, zoned
Yes.
that way.
In his email, he says that it was I-1 and it was downsoned. It actually I-1 and PB are planned industrial PI are the same thing, so it wasn't a downgrade. What happened were design changes in the requirements. So, like he said, the old zoning code, which was there used to be a manufacturing company there called Geiger Brickell, and when they purchased there a long time ago, probably 30 years ago or more, the zoning code allowed metal-sided buildings. Even by 2004, we had upgraded, and by 2014, we had upgraded again. So there were some changes in the zoning code, but it had always been zoned industrial for a long time.
Mr. Wilkie, if I can add, and I'll ask you to kind of provide a little more detail. This property was at one point owned by the business to the east of it with the intention of it being combined to that property. It just never happened.
Yeah, I'm going to say somewhere around 2006, Geiger Brickell got bought up by a business in North Carolina, and they moved the whole operations there.
Can I speak?
Jay?
Yeah, this is Jay Lang from the Lang Group. Rick Wollin asked me to attend.
Can we suspend the rules real quick?
Jay, give us a second.
I moved to suspend the rules.
Go ahead, Steve.
I would move to suspend the rules to allow Jay Lang to address the council.
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Fields, second by Ms. Quidnow to suspend. All those in favor? Steve, aye. That's a 5-0. Mr. Lang, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, Rick Wollin is the owner of I apologize, I'm driving, of the Tyranena Park Road LLC. He bought the property back in 2009, and at the time, yeah, it was I-2 zoning, if my memory is correct. But saying what Geiger Brickell's intent was or not to combine it with the building to the east, I think is beyond everybody's scope. Really what we have right now is Rick had purchased that one to kind of control his own destiny when he owned Fiberdome, but also then to know who your neighbor was, because it came available through, at the time, was a foreclosure. And so he picked it up because it was dilapidated and in bad shape. When he sold the building, we tried to combine it with the sale of the Fiberdome properties. And I'd hate to disagree, but I'd have to, Dustin, on the use of those being incubator. They're really quite too small to be incubator, and nothing's changed in that neighborhood. To say it's trending in industrial it's just been industrial. It's been what it's been for 20 plus years. The property to the west, which is kind of a weird mix of single family and metal pole barn building, which I'm not sure how he's storing highway signs, or I'm not sure what the business is. That hasn't changed. And then recently, the buildings to the east of the S&S plumbing building, which I think is township, they just put up a pole barn building on a single family piece of land. But that size of 3/4 of an acre, with the zoning and the way planning is established in Lake Mills, becomes very, I want to say, detrimental to getting new businesses to start up. The cost of the engineering plans for water runoff, everything else that's required, isn't worth the effort for a 3/4 1 acre piece of land. Whereas it's more appealing to go to the business park or industrial park, where you can pick up a 3 acre piece of land. You have expansion potential, and future use, as you grow. But why make the investment in that small piece of land? So the industrial use just isn't attractive anymore. And he's trying to get something where there's a use that you can improve the property. But again, trying to do, let's call it a metal pole barn. I mean, what he wanted to do was a insulated metal building with a concrete floor of a decent volume. I mean, you could put some, stone on the front of it, whatever, to dress it up, but it wasn't just a pole barn. It just, again, it's just too onerous for that size of a property to, put $10,000 plus in engineering fees for water runoff, et cetera. So we're trying to find a happy medium to get a, better investment in that neighborhood, rather than let the house dilapidate. And when we went to the building permit department, et cetera, to say, well, what about putting in an egress window in the basement and making a rec room in the basement that's legal? That's not allowed by the zoning code. We were turned down. Initially, we were said it was okay, and then after consultation, I assume with Mead and Hunt, it was turned down. So we're kind of caught at a crossroads. Is this being forced into being, I don't know, removed, or what's going on? So that's the story.
I can comment a little bit more, Jay, for you, that Geiger Brickell bought, Geiger International, which was working here as Geiger Brickell, bought that property in 1996 with the intent of consolidating it into their industrial processes for expansion. They sold it in 2009 to Mr. Cratch. And then that same year it was sold at sheriff's sale to the Wollins. So it was originally bought and zoned under the conditions that it be I-1, and with the intention of long-term conversion of those areas into industrial. The property to the west is still in the town of Lake Mills. And the property to the east that you mentioned with the new one is in the town of Astelin. So they would have different zoning regulations in those areas.
So, Mr. Lang, to rezone this to a single-family residential, how would that benefit the Wollins?
Well, what they're trying to do is get it to be improved or make it of greater value. Right now, when you look at the house, it's, I should look at it as I've got it on the MLS, but I apologize, I'm driving. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1-car attached garage. Let's see, there's, I think, a basement, has a toilet, like stub only in the basement, so you could do like a rec room, an extra bedroom down there if you had an egress window. But you can't pull a permit to improve that house, other than your stay right inside the footprint, nor change again the basement, make a full bathroom, rec room, egress, etc. Because it's the zoning is not where it's intended to go, to see a better house there.
And this might be a better question for Mr. Wolf, but does it allow for the outbuilding, the garage that was proposed?
It will allow under the planned industrial zoning to have an accessory building. He's right, there are requirements, site plans. Again, there may be stormwater management requirements, there are building requirements, green space requirements that need to be met. What they brought in was looking to build a 1,500 square foot building, and as a part of the permit review process, it apparently didn't meet certain requirements. And again, this is, in the eyes of the zoning code, a planned industrial property. So it does need to follow those processes. There are statutory limitations on how much improvement can be made to non-conforming structures or non-conforming uses. You're very limited in non-conforming uses, and those are parroted in the zoning codes. That's why he's referencing those. The intention is that non-conforming uses will go away over time, right? They can continue to be used in a certain fashion as they currently are, but they aren't intended to be enlarged, right? Or the use is expanded, and that's what he's talking about. So it is a challenging site because it is sandwiched between a number of industrial or light industrial uses there. So there are just a few additional requirements that have to be met to put an accessory building out there.
So I'm not an expert of code by any means, but would he have to do a conditional use then if he wants to do different improvements on the property then?
Well, they would need to be in keeping with the planned industrial district. So we do allow for multiple, buildings, and this would be an accessory building on the property. The principal building is the residence, if you will. Mm-hmm. But if you thought of the residence being used as some office type, something that's allowed in the planned industrial district, he would again just need to follow the process by which to get approval for the accessory building. So it is certainly possible to do those things. This is, like I said, a challenging site because, it was developed obviously years and years ago, and everything that grew up around it is contrary to single-family residential.
Well, I not to disagree, but to the west, even though it's township, what is that? That's a single-family home with a business out of it. But they're never going to object to it being single-family there. I mean, this is what's the highest and best use for this property? And it certainly is not office. Office is not popular. There's a glut of office since we've gone through COVID. It's like, again, the idea of improving it and making it a better single family when we've got such a demand for single family in the market. What's the highest and best use? But office is not. Is it possible that the zoning made a mistake all the way back to 1996 when Geiger wanted to do what they were doing? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But it hasn't changed or progressed in all this time.
I have to make a correction. The property to the west is in the city, and it is Zone P, planned industrial. So it's been that way. It's been that type of use for a long time. But that's a correction. Sorry.
But yeah, okay. So that's been grandfathered in then, probably from what it was whenever it started, I guess. Steve, is that what you'd
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's been grandfathered in for a long time.
So again, when you say that, again, the neighborhood's trending, it's like, I don't know. I look at those two parcels, and Dustin said it before, these are super unique parcels. Like, what's going to happen to them? And I'd be very surprised if they ever became more incubator industrial. They're just really tough.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So that was the first reading, so we'll have 2 more readings of this ordinance. So the third reading will come the end of September. Item N on the agenda is Ordinance 1244. This is the first reading. Lori?
Ordinance 1244, amending of City Lake Mills Ordinance Section 660-44, official zoning map, City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin. Parcel identification number 246-071-0734-025. Parcel identification, owner Robert Mangen, vacant land east of Brewster Drive and northeast of Tyranena Park Road, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. The City Council of the City of Lake Mills, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, does ordain as follows. Section 1, City of Lake Mills, Ordinance Section 660-44A, the official zoning ordinance and map of the City of Lake Mills are hereby amended to zone the following described 15.31 acres of vacant land located east of Brewster Drive and northeast of Tyranena Park Road, identified by a parcel identification number 246-0714-0734-025 in the City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin, from family residential R1-4 to multifamily residential R3-12 as depicted in the attached map, which is incorporated herein. Section 2, all ordinances are or parts of ordinance inconsistent with or contravening the provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed. Section 3, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect upon passage and publication as provided by law.
Thank you, Lori. That was the first reading. So again, the third reading will be the second meeting in September. Dustin, do you have a comment on this?
I had
City
Dustin
staff,
comment
go ahead.
I had Dustin comment on the last one because I knew Jay was on there probably representing Rick. So there's nobody here tonight representing Mr. Mangen. So if we could just hold that one off until the next meeting or the third reading, that'd be fine.
That's fine. Any questions? Yes.
I just have one comment for the council, and it's that there was public comment at the Plan Commission on this item at the last meeting, and if anybody wanted to go look at that, that last meeting was July 26th, if you wanted to hear the public comment on this item.
Yeah, we had more public comment than normal.
All right. Recommendations for future agenda items. So, Mr. Wilkie, the next meeting will be your last official meeting, correct? So you're going to give us a big city manager report? Is that part of the agenda?
No.
All right, so we do have the tabling of the Lake Mills Fire Department service level upgrade and ARPA funds. You're going to look at different funding avenues there? Okay. Anything else?
Not from us.
Second and third readings on things from tonight. Yeah.
All right. If no other comments, we stand adjourned at 10:05. Thank you for your patience for a long meeting.